Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Lower in the Tone. This episode I've got Brent Newitt, 1/3 of the legendary Breakbeat outfit Aquasky. We caught up a few weeks back in his hometown of Bournemouth and recorded a conversation. Brett's an incredibly interesting guy, well travelled, and it turns out I've known him for over 20 years. But as always, that'll be at the back end of the show. Before then, I have a load of techie goodness to play to you. So let's get this show started. I've got a few shows I need to plug. On the 6th of July, I'll be at the Egg in London at the Bank of Switches, alongside Theo Comp, Big Nick D and Hoobie Sounds. And then on the 7th of July, I'll be at the Brothers Grimm We Speak Techno in Bristol. That's St Paul's Carnival weekend, so that'll be a big one. And that'll be alongside the Liberators, Chris and Aaron, and my old mate Jamie Rabo Sapien. Right, there's some congratulations in order. Some very good friends of mine, Matt and Gemma. That's Mr. and Mrs. Dopamine to you. On the birth of little Louis Goddard. Well done, guys. And also another new arrival. This time my teammate Dan Van Dale and his girlfriend Matilda. Congratulations on the birth of Lumen. Tons of babies. Okay, I got a few shouts as well. Cass Holiday, Fox One, Tony Gainsborough, the Alliance crew in Perth, Nick Dawes, and some old friends of mine, Emma Belcher and Harriet Manning. Also a big shout to my man in Adelaide, Anthony Antics Gifford. If you want a track listing for this show, head over to patreon.com/lowering the tone. Absolutely love this track. Neurodriver on the level. You can pick this up via Beatport, Bandcamp, iTunes, pretty much anywhere, and it is on Lowering the Tone. Awesome stuff from Dom. Check this out. Information on the show, head over to loweringthetone.london.
You're listening to Meet Katie on Lowering the Tone.
Don't forget, still got that interview with Brent Newitt, and that's coming up at the back end of the show. I'm going to get deep for a little while. Something new from me, my remix of Etica's Perfect Nightmare. Again, this is on Lowering the Tone. shouts. Loki from Toronto, Catherine Allen, Ricky Rock and Rory Brenston, Max Forbes Gower, Monique Stevens, and a slightly belated birthday wishes to the lovely Cheyenne Milner. Also, I'd like to say a thank you to Neil and Abby from Big Fish Little Fish. I played for them a few weeks back at the Trinity in Bristol. It was a under 8-year-old's rave and it was awesome. Right, upwards and onwards.
Unpleasant surprise.
soy Josie Telch, estás escuchando Lowering the Tone.
few more names to check. Sam Warren, Elias Sinderson, Thomas Ray, Chris Ashton, and my mate Shane Willis. Congratulations on the recent wins in the Jiu-Jitsu tournament. Back to the music. show I need to plug. If you're in Canada, I'm playing at the Emotion Festival on August the 4th. Venue looks amazing. It's in Manitoba. Also, there's some other friends of mine playing. Freak Nasty, Freestylers and Worthy. So it's well worth checking it out. Okay, a few more tracks and then we're going to get to that interview. hope you enjoyed the music. Got pretty deep there. I know some of you were expecting a breakbeat set. Last episode I played a 2-hour straight break set, so I just wanted to mix it up this session. As I mentioned before, if you want to track listen to the show, you need to go to patreon.com/lowering the tone. Right, so let's get into that interview.
Exclusive.
Okay, I would like to welcome Brent from Aquasky, 1/3 of Aquasky, to Lowering the Tone. This episode I've come down to Poole in Dorset near Bournemouth. It was a lovely drive.
Yeah.
And this is the second. I'm interviewing you in your what do you call this?
Home environment.
Yeah, this is your
the home invasion. Lowering the tone. Home invasion.
That's it.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have you back down here, Mark. It's what was it? Last time you were down here with us was 2005, and we did Overneath.
No, we done Feathers.
No, we didn't. We did Overneath first.
Yeah, then we done Feathers.
Then we
afterwards.
done Feathers.
Yeah,
following.
Yeah, that's right. Oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah.
Oh my God. We just worked out that we've known each other for
23 years now. We met in 1995.
Yeah, you haven't aged at all.
Nor have you, Mark. Keep the compliments coming.
That's it. Right. So, I mean, let's start at the beginning because there's loads to unpack. I would like to talk about how you ended up in breaks. Obviously, that's why you're famous, and that's why we work together. But
yeah, of course.
But predating that, when I first met you, you were recording for Moving Shadow and Polydor.
Well, in 1995, we were recording for Moving Shadow, the UK drum and bass label, one of the best premier. So we're also recording for Reinforced back then, which is Four Heroes label.
Yeah, it's a wicked label.
Yeah. Some of you go back to listen to some of those tunes now, and you think,
still
wow,
stand
next
up, don't
level.
they?
Yeah, next level.
Yeah.
Rob Playford, who ran Moving Shadow, he was Goldie's engineer, so he was the main man behind Timeless. Rob's just one of these drum and bass folk heroes. He's involved in film trailers and stuff, I think, in LA nowadays. But yeah, he had the whole Moving Shadow thing going down. We were also doing we're recording on R&S at that time as well, Renat's label.
Yeah. I'm trying to get him to do a show, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I used to record for him as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go.
Another connection.
That would be a really. That probably connects back to our lovely former manager.
Oh, yes, it would.
Yeah, we could go on to that in a bit, can't we?
We'll do some management bashing later.
We're funny enough, we looked him up yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we can cover that in a bit. Yeah, God, I'm crushing my knuckles just thinking about him.
I can see that. Gripping the table.
Yeah. So 1995, Aquasky had just been created. We got signed to Moving Shadow. We started recording in February 1995 as a trio. Prior to that, independently, we were recording. So David had the studio, and I've been working with Dave. I used to make trip hop in 1993, 94, 95 for Kiss FM DJ in London called Bob Jones, Dr. Bob Jones. And Kieran was recording with Dave, making early sort of, I suppose, tail end of rave or jungle. Let's call it jungle. So Kieran was doing that, and Kieran used to come in on a Sunday to record with Dave, and me and Dave were living together. Well, not in that sense, but we were, former students, had a student house. So I moved into one of the rooms there. Dave had the studio downstairs. We had a record label running in the roof. And I believe there was also a little pirate radio station thing going on there at the same time.
This is in Bournemouth.
In Bournemouth, yeah, in a little area of Bournemouth called Charminster. And Kieran used to come in at the weekends and used to leave mixtapes for me to check out. and it was that first kind of liquid sound of '94. So it
Okay.
was things like Horizons, Apollo, that kind of thing on LTJ Bookham's good-looking label.
Yeah.
Music Box by Ronnie Size, Jazz Note by Crust.
Right.
You had the Global Communication guys working under the name of Chameleon. Mark Pritchard and Tom Middleton.
Yeah.
So they're actually not far from here. They're a place. They grew up in Taunton or Yeovil or somewhere.
Really?
So
Okay.
they were making drum and bass and remixing things on Moving on Mowax, and I was greatly inspired by what I was hearing. I mean, I'm a former raver. I've been there since sort of going to parties since '89. First found out about the rave culture in '88, like probably a lot of people of our age group, and got massively into that kind of rave thing, travelling Dorset, Wiltshire, Devon, Cornwall, looking for free parties at the weekends, in convoys, meeting after clubs.
What year was this?
That would have been 1990, because I just started driving. So 1990, we would meet up outside Madison's in Bournemouth at 2:00, and then at 3:00 we'd all be outside Remix in Bournemouth, and then we'll meet another load of cars there. And then we used to just head off to either Pepperbox Hill in Wiltshire, in Salisbury, or we'd head off into Devon, and we'll get there like 5:30 in the morning. And the only way back then, pre-mobile phones, is, I'm sure a few of us can remember, the only way of finding the parties was either being in these convoys or stopping somewhere roughly in the area, winding the windows down of the car, turning the engine off, and listening out for the music, or looking out for the police helicopters, which would often lead us to where the parties would be. And that's I did that every weekend for a good few years.
So you were a raver.
Massive raver, which would obviously... years later, you would hear that in our music production. But so we used to... Well, I say we. I didn't know the other guys at that point. I used to go to a lot of these raves and burnt myself out. Basically, I just had enough. I was burning the candle at both ends, and I wanted to go to college. So I wanted to study. So I decided to stop all of that. And I was doing a bit of a dead end job while living at home in the New Forest in England, so I went to night school every night, Monday through to Friday. Studied, got all the qualifications I should have got at school, but I messed around too much and was always in trouble. So I got all my qualifications and basically learnt photography, and then got accepted into an art college in Bournemouth. And that's when I met Dave, and going back to these tapes that Kieran was supplying, was sort of feeding my musical habit. And I was hearing all this liquid drum and bass that were using samples and jazzy samples, a lot of which was in my record collection because I collect records. And I was thinking, well, damn, I know that sample and I know this sample.
One second, I have to say, is Brent's just showed me his record collection. It was huge. That's a whole garage full of records, wall to wall.
Yeah.
So you're still collecting now?
Still collecting. I bought a collection last night, as I was saying. My neighbour across the road moved out, so I bought his whole record collection, which is in boxes in the front room now.
But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, you just flicked over. It's like, I collect records. You collect a lot of records. There's a shop in there.
There's a few shops in there. I mean, I've always thought about getting on and selling them at one day, but the effort in doing that. But
thing about people with addictions.
You can't break them.
But I mean to sell them, but I can't.
a lot of those records in there are when we started the Master Blaster, Aquasky Master Blaster, which we'll cover in a bit, I'm sure, I would take all the gigs in Eastern Europe and Russia because I was collecting records. So I'm a big Eastern European Soviet bloc record collector. Because to be a musician in Soviet Russia or the States in the USSR, back then, you couldn't become a musician as a job without getting to a really, really high level. And then the powers that be would deem that you were knowledgeable enough to have that as a career, as a job in the whatever country that you were part of that block. So there were like numerous different scenes, but the level of the musicianship was so high, because of these musicians were trained so well. I went out to Prague in 1997, just with my girlfriend at the time, and to collect records, and I was picking records up for like 5p, because it was only been out of communism for I think 5-6 years, maybe at that point, something like that, and so things were so cheap. I mean, these records are worth hundreds now, but I was picking them up for 5-10p a record, which would be like 15 cents or something like that, and they'd be worth something like $300 now. But I have records, and I was hearing.
We gotta watch this because it's picking up. It's picking it up. Okay. That's what I'm looking at. So I can see it picking up. While you're talking, sorry,
my creaky knees. Yeah, records. No, I've got records, and I was hearing a lot of my records on these liquid drum and bass tracks, and I was sampling a lot of the similar records in the trip hop I was making. Yeah. But it wasn't trip hop at that point. It was
big beat.
No, it's instrumental hip hop.
Okay.
When I started making, there was no such thing as trip hop. That was a term that came up, was brought up by a magazine, like all musical terms.
Yeah, it was around the time of Portishead and Massive. They started to
94, sort of like that,
they started to use that as a sweeping statement.
Yeah, for that whole Bristol smoked beats. That was another way of what they used to call it. And so my instrumental hip hop then became trip hop. But so anyway, I was hearing all these tunes that Kieran had on his mixtapes, and I was just thinking, well, if I knew a bit more about this music, we could make music like this. So one Sunday we decided, well, how about all three of us go in the studio? I'll bring a few records in, and we'll see what will happen. And the output of that particular session was a tune called Images, which was our first release on Moving Shadow in 1995. So we wrote that. And then we wrote the follow-up Desires, and they were just 2 sessions. We didn't spend that long, literally a couple of weekends, a couple of Sundays on these tunes, and then we were living in Bournemouth. We weren't connected to the jungle scene. There wasn't, there was a scene in Bournemouth. Don't get me wrong, and Bournemouth very much embraced the liquid sound. So we would always have Fabio and Bookham down, and they became friends. But at the time we had no idea. So I remember jumping on my bike, and I think it was like a rally chopper, and I would cycle all the way into HMV in Bournemouth, and I was sitting down in the aisles with a pen and a paper, writing down the addresses of the record labels that we liked. And I came back with a list, and we chose Moving Shadow, we chose Reinforce, and we chose Mo Wax, all three record labels that had a lot of input in so Mo Wax obviously with the trip hop, but they also had the global communications Chameleon doing their drum and bass remixes, some outstanding remixes of Palmskin Productions' The Beast, I think it was called, and Moving Shadow and Reinforce was just music that all three of us grew up, because we're all from the rave scene, except we never knew each other. So yeah, we sent I got the cassette tapes. We did the demos. I spray painted them all up. I tagged them all up and made them look wicked. I've still got one, and we sent them off in the post. And within the week, we had we had Digo, we had Rob Playford, Digo from Four Hero, Rob Playford. We had James Lavelle from Mo Wax, all on the phoning our little student house up in Bournemouth. And then we decided to go with Moving Shadow, because it had collectively between the three of us, that had the biggest influence. So we went with them, but thankfully, we kept our friendship with Reinforce, so we started recording for them as well. And I had a side project myself called Space Link, which I was signed to Reinforced as that. That was. I'm starting to trail off now. But yeah, no, we.
So that's how you started in drum and bass. You kind of, all jointly.
Yeah, it was just an idea, and we had no idea what we'd. I mean, it's like when we signed the deal with Moving Shadow, we didn't even have a name. So we were called at the time Jazzy at Sunflowers and Artemis, because Artemis was Kieran's drum and bass label and Jazzy at Sunflowers was my trip hop.
Right.
So that's what the name was, but Dave wasn't included in that because he was like the engineer for both of those projects.
But Dave used to do rave prior to, so Dave was a rave producer.
Yeah, Dave used to do all the Mad Dog, all the on Underdog Recordings, which was an old UK label that used to share the house that we lived in, a chap called Ollie. Funny enough, we are re-releasing his first EP this year, so we're just so that's 25-year anniversary re-release of Dave's first EP, which is worth hundreds of pounds on Discogs. So
what's the name of the project? What was the name of the
Mad
project?
Dog.
Mad Dog.
Mad
the
Dog.
Name of the release. So
Mad Dog was the group, and the one we're releasing is the Monged Out EP.
Monged Out.
Yeah. Dave and his partner at the time, Sean. Sean was a demon on the Amen. So was Dave, but Sean was like, he would chop an Amen to buggery. He would just
an Amen break for anyone.
Yeah, the Amen break. The Winston's Amen brother. So that's a classic beat that us British ravers grew up on.
Yeah.
And I think it probably was sampled from the why it probably came so incorporated in the early days of rave, and to this day is I would imagine is from NWA, straight out of Compton. I think so the break was clean on that, so it got lifted. That was 1988, so 89 you'd start hearing, 90 you'd start hearing the Amen. So I think a lot of it was connected possibly to NWA's album and single that came out a few years prior, with that raw Amen break that was there to be stolen. But Sean could cut the fuck out of an Amen. He was a master. Dave and Sean O'Hara. And then
Mad Dog.
That were Mad Dog.
Right,
and then Ollie Griffiths-Jones, or Ollie the Kid MC, as he was previously. There is video footage out there of Dave and Ollie's rave band from 1990. And back then, I think we were. This is pre-Cubase, so we were using something called cadenza, and then got onto early Cubase. I think about 93, 94 Cubase was we were starting to use it, and it had, which a few people may remember, it had a paintbrush.
That's right.
Yeah, do you remember the paintbrush?
Yeah, I do. We're talking about a sequencer, in case anyone's wondering.
Yeah, sequencer, and there was like the option of so you could draw notes in on the virtual keyboard, but you also had a paintbrush option, which means that you could then just drag the paintbrush over a certain note, and depending on like whether you're doing it 32, 64s, or what kind of sequence that you were working with on Cubase, you could drag a paintbrush and you could chop. Basically, it would just make amens just go, and you just basically drag a paintbrush over a number of different keys, and that way it would just create an amen edit. And it was incredible. Like, it's not an option. You don't have the paintbrush anymore in Cubase, but back then it was such a great bit of kit. You know, because you only had like 8 seconds, 12 seconds, maybe 8 seconds on the 950, maybe even less of sample time. And I think on the 3000 you had like 12 seconds.
That's right.
So you really had to get as creative as you could with the limited resources you had back then. So, you know, you listen to a lot of that early music and you might think, oh, it's a bit basic, or it's not like as dynamic as it is now. But you got to think, back then we only had seconds to work with of sample time. So, you know, you had to be as creative as you could. And I mean, God, I listen back now and I think, you know, how did we manage to produce 8-minute tracks using like 8 seconds of sample time? No. How is this possible? But,
so that's so just to backtrack slightly. So you all came together through you all had your own different flavours that you all brought to the party.
Yeah, Kieran was a punk from a punk band. He was a drummer. Dave
Yeah,
was.
because Kieran's quite musical, isn't he?
Yeah. He learnt to play drums. He wasn't allowed a drum kit. I don't know whether they could afford it or whether it was a sound. But he learnt to drum on ice cream boxes. Dave was a massive sort of new romantic, kind of loved that electronica sound. Trevor Horn, Art of Noise, that kind of thing was big for Dave.
Good era.
Yeah, very good. So Dave was brought him into keyboards and synthesizers and trying to take them apart and build them. He was into his electronics. So by the time I think he was 16, Dave was running a pirate radio station out of his bedroom in Brockenhurst in New Forest, which literally probably has a population of about 200 people, not even that. So he was running a pirate radio out of that and producing under the name of Mad Dog and various other names back then. And I was a kid that also grew up in the New Forest like the other two guys, and I was just into record collecting, into hip-hop, into graffiti, just like into that whole kind of rebellious kind of thing. So I picked up on the similar vibe, and the three of us kind of had our own history, but when we came together we kind of formed like Voltron.
Right. So, I mean, you had a string of releases as Aquasky doing drum and bass.
Yes.
I mean, I'm guessing that's never kind of drifted far from. Obviously, that's where it started. I mean, moving into breaks isn't actually a long stretch of the imagination, although I came in from a different angle completely. But a lot of people kind of went rave, jungle, drum and bass, breaks, or hip hop, and kind of various different sort of beat based projects, beat based genres, should I say? But for you, it was from drum and bass, from rave, jungle, drum and bass into breaks. Yeah,
well, we were the first people to ever release a non-drum and bass track on Moving Shadows, so we were already producing down tempo tracks as Aquasky, but in all honesty, it probably didn't do us the greatest of favors back then, because it was very frowned upon in the 90s, in the mid 90s, to deviate from drum and bass and make other styles of music. So we were often, we used to get a bit of shit for it. We were like three kids from Bournemouth, sort of making drum and bass.
What are you doing with our genre?
Unfortunately we got tagged on into that intelligent drum and bass, and obviously that puts anyone's back up when you hear like intelligent. What, you're more intelligent than us? No, that's not the point of what. Luckily Fabio came in with the liquid sound in '96, or the liquid tag, and the intelligent tag disappeared. So we thankfully, that didn't last very long, but it didn't help us that we were producing lots and lots of different kinds of music, and the drum and bass fraternity, the old guard, as we used to call them, didn't like it, and but that's just what we were. We were, we weren't just drum and bass artists. We were kind of like all-rounders back then.
Right.
So we signed with Polydor in 1997. We were
so this is a big major label for
massive,
anyone that doesn't.
Yeah, I think I think we probably had one of the biggest paid major label drum and bass deals of the 90s.
Wow.
I mean, we made an awful lot of money. We lived off that money for 5-6 years. I mean, it was so much money.
Well, it was a long time ago now.
Well, let's say I think once we had an amazing lawyer, Mark Cray, at Babington, Bray and Cray, and he's a big time lawyer now. And he put in a clause that if Polydor was ever bought out, that we would be allowed to leave with a severance pay and all our catalogue.
No.
A year later, after we signed, because Polydor were trying to make us become Represent, Ronnie Size's group.
Right.
Oh, make it sound like Represent, make it. And we were like, we're not Represent. This is not what we're doing. We're flying out to San Francisco and working with jazz musicians like Mark Murphy, and they were they wanted us to be doing this whole other thing. So we weren't getting the support we wanted after our first EP. We'd recorded, there's an unreleased Aquasky album called Below the Steel, which never got released, and that was for Polydor. But we we weren't getting the support we wanted from the label, as I'm sure any drum and bass act in the 90s found out, because none of them retained their major label signing. So we all suffered. And luckily our lawyer was so good that he put that clause in there. Seagram, which is a huge, I think maybe an American company, came in and bought Polydor. So we exercised our right, and we left with another chunk of big cash.
No.
All our rights, all the thousands and thousands of pounds that were spent on the recording of those tunes, and we walked away with the lot. And then they tried to get our lawyer to work for Polydor after that, because they were so impressed with what he did. I would say we probably got back then in total getting on for $250,000, something like that.
I mean, back then though, drum and bass, it was such a new and exciting scene. It was the major labels were just chucking cash at it.
They were throwing a lot. We would come back, and we would have so many answer phone messages on because our phone number must have got out there from major labels trying to sign us.
Wow.
We would come back, and we'd have a guy called Simon Gavin from Polydor, and he'd be leaving all these messages. Other labels were leaving messages. We were just three kids having fun. We were coming back thinking, who the hell is this? Why is he phoning us? And we would never get back to them, never. And then we ended up like working with Miss Lady Keir from Delight. She'd heard from us.
I remember now.
Yeah. I used to used to go out with her for a bit back then as well.
She was hot as shit.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was good fun.
Player.
And she come over, and she was also. I'm not sure she was working with 4 Hero, but she was friends with Digo and Mark, and she was also friends with a guy called Gerald.
Yeah,
and so she invited me up to Gerald's studio in Hammersmith, and I got on really well with a guy called Gerald. We used to hang out quite a lot in his studio and all night in this studio. And he had a manager called Dermot Smith, I think his name was. And I was just chatting, saying about all these labels, and he was obviously thinking, oh, Simon Gavin, who's a big player. Oh God, these guys are like. So he said, well, my brother is a manager. Maybe you might want to talk to him. Well, we did. We talked to him. His brother was called Chaz, and his partner was called Paul Dowling, who we're still friends with now. And we went up and met. It was only Chaz Smash Madness.
Yes.
Yeah, we ended up with Chaz from Madness, One Step Beyond guy, being our manager, driving us around in classic Rovers around Camden and in North London. Going into the office, there'll be bedders, or there'll be Suggs, or there'll be people like that in the office. So we ended up signing through knowing Gerald, a guy called Gerald. We ended up signing with Quiet Man Management, and then they went off and got us the deal. And it was a very successful deal.
Brilliant.
Well, the funny thing is, years later, we ended up becoming Black Noise, which was another group that we did for Southern Fried, Norman Cook's label, and we were managed by this company, this group called Anglo Management, Gary Blackburn, and he also managed Madness. So I then got to speak to Chaz again 20 years later or something, or 10, 15 years later, from being our manager to both being on the same management company together. Yeah.
That's bonkers. I don't think anyone would imagine like Aquasky being managed by one of the guys from Madness.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's like
I've still got photos. I've got photos of us with Chaz and us. I've got photos. Oh my God. Like when we signed with Polydor, Polydor were based in Hammersmith as well, and we were taken up to the top floor of the Polydor offices, which was like, I think Universal. I think, there was a couple of buildings where they were all
the
in.
Secret floor.
The secret floor, yeah. And we had to go up, and they brought in all sandwiches. This was our signing. the signing of Aquasky to Polydor, and there's photos of us, like really uncomfortable photos of us as the three of Aquasky with long hair, all scruffy and that, and the executives of Polydor on the top floor with a whole like sandwich buffets laid out, signing paperwork and all of this. So yeah.
Just all sitting up there spending the money before you get it.
Well, the thing is, I really wish we had spent the money on property back then, because we didn't. We rented, and I mean, I have to say,
it's a common story. Yeah.
We were very good boys with our money.
Yeah.
We a lot of people get the money. I remember a few people in drum and bass who got their money and bought Ferraris. Like Pesce. Right. I remember Pesce bought himself a Ferrari. A lot of people put a lot of money into cars and stuff like that. I bought a Ford Cortina Mark III GXL from the 1970s. Dave bought a Renault 5 Monaco, and Kieran bought a Mark 1 VW Golf. And that's basically, and then and we were living in London, and we just thought, why are we spending all this rent money in London? Let's move back to Bournemouth where we can save a load of money.
Yeah.
And we basically probably, we lived like students, even though we had all that money. We didn't spend it because it propped up our career.
Was that the house that I came to in?
No, that was
another one.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That was it wasn't far from there, but it was a different
So
house.
after having, I mean, even signing a deal like that, a lot of people would have felt like they've made it anyway, because signing a massive major label deal back then was the holy grail of all producers,
apart from us, because we really just bumbled our way into the deal.
Right.
I mean, when I say how much money we did get, I mean that was including the severance when we left as well.
Right.
So
that's
it was only for recording. We've always retained our publishing.
Right.
We didn't sign our publishing over in that deal.
And I'm trying to explain that to someone that doesn't know much about the back end, the business side of things. The recording's only one half of it.
Yeah.
The publishing can carry on paying forever.
Yeah. When a record label signed you, they would sign just the physical, the recording side of it, and then another company would quite often offer you the money for the publishing.
Yeah.
Every piece of music has what they say is two sides.
Yeah.
The recording and the publishing. So
we retained that.
Well, thankfully that's Bob Jones. Bob Jones
really?
always advised me never to sell my publishing. And I'll tell you what, another great thing, and this is something I've lived by ever since. And funnily enough, I can't remember the producers now. They're massive drum and bass producers, and I had a conversation with them. Oh, who was it now? I told them this quote, and they ended up retweeting it because it's such a good quote. Bob Jones told me in 1993, "Be nice to the people on the way up because you're going to meet them on the way down."
Yeah.
And I've always been nice to everyone that I've ever met and worked with, and tried to be as helpful as I can to everyone because of that advice, and that feeds into my way of viewing life and karma. And
it's a good life quote for people in general.
I think in every walk of life you can learn from that. But he also said retain your publishing, which we did, and it pays us out every 6 months, and good. We have good wedges of cash coming every 6 months from the publishing, because we've got 25 years of music
catalogue, yeah,
and 500 plus tunes.
That's all right, isn't it?
Yeah.
so right, but I mean, a lot of people would be interested to know how you made the transition into.
Breakbeat. Actually, okay. Well, I could tell you this. This was. Let me just try and get my brain in gear. How did he get into this? I think it was during. Was it during? It might have been Moving Shadow, when we went back to Moving Shadow after Polydor, or whilst we were with Polydor. But we had a press guy, and that press guy was called Adam Freeland.
And who did he work for? The press company?
I can't remember.
Anyway, look, I just no one's interested in the company that he worked for. But
but
the
Adam,
interconnection with R&S, because he went on to work for R&S.
Oh, did he?
Adam Freeland went to work for R&S.
I didn't know that.
There's a lot of people that have moved around before they were famous.
Adam
so
was obviously
your press guy.
Yeah,
he was Rennie's as well.
Oh,
Yeah, he was Rennie's press guy.
He was just
Rennie
Adam,
Pilgrim.
Adam
Played with
Freeland.
him, yeah.
You know, he was just a guy, and we did our press with him, and that was it. We never saw him again. Never thought of him again. And then we were touring Body Shock. Oh, so he must have done Polydor. It must have been Polydor because we were touring Body Shock, which was our first album on Moving Shadow in 1998, I think. No, 1999. And we were touring it, and we ended up in a club in Cornwall, in what is that? Yeah, the famous place in Cornwall. That's Newquay. And we were in a weird club, and we were doing the main room, and there was and then we saw on the fly Adam Freeland. He was in the back room, and we were like, oh God, I wonder if it's the same bloke. It was the same guy. It was it was the guy that used to do our press, but now he was like quite a well-known DJ. And he was playing this strange music in the back room, and he said to us like, well, I think this is a new thing going on at the moment. This has been '99. He said, I think you guys would be really good at this.
It's a club called Lush.
It was a weird club, like an industrial unit, and it was a little about
the night
2 miles outside of
yeah.
town, and there was loads of amusement arcades.
Yeah,
it was on
yeah,
a cliff or something.
yeah.
I seem to have in my memory.
Yeah.
Because I remember the next day we went down and we were having breakfast, and
so that was for my own benefit because I played for that guy as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but yeah. Anyway, sorry.
The next day we were having breakfast down by the front, and the gulls, the seagulls.
Come and nick your chips.
Yeah, so I was stitching Dave up, and I kept getting chips and like putting them on his head and like on his clothes, so he wouldn't know they were there. And these gulls were dive bombing him.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's an aside. And he was like, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll send you some music." So he started sending us lots and lots of CDs, and we would sit there, listen to them, and just think, "Well, yeah, I like it, but." Coming from a drum and bass background, how the hell does anyone dance to this music?
Yeah,
like this.
This was New School Breaks.
New School Breaks.
It?
Yeah,
it was very awkward.
Yeah, I can imagine it was. So we started making similar music to that on our Aftershock album, which was in 2000. But we also started recording some bits and bobs for Marine Parade, which was Adam Freeland's label, and we did Sure Shot. And the EP Sure Shot, and we gave it to Adam, and he didn't like it, and it wasn't really what he was about. A lot of the CDs he was sending us, we again we were thinking, well, no wonder this is backroom like DJ like music, because how the hell did people coming from drum and bass and rave
music?
There was no structure. There was you didn't know what was going to happen when. There was no bass to it. It wasn't lively, and so we came up with Sure Shot. He didn't like that, but a couple of years later, maybe 5 years later, he came up to me and said, "I really wish I had signed that record," but because he didn't sign it, we were like, "Well, what do we do with it?" So again, we were like, "Well, let's." Like we were with drum and bass 5 years earlier, let's go and try and find out some of these labels, write down their addresses, send them some demos. So that's what we did, and we sent them to Botch It, and they jumped straight on it. So they came and signed Botch It and Scarpa, which was Vinny and Martin's label, and they came down to Bournemouth. It was Vinny and Sonia, both of who unfortunately have passed away since.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So they came down, sat on our sofa, and we played them more music, and they were very keen to sign us. So we signed the 12-inch, the EP Sure Shot to them, but we'd also recorded something else, a track called, this was in 2000, a track called 777, and we played it to them, and they literally. They just didn't know what was going on. They were like, "What the fuck is this?" It was like, "This is no, we can't sign it. We can't sign." Well, I don't know what do we do with it. It was like, there wasn't a tune prior to 777 that could come near it. Like we used. It later became termed as baseline breaks.
Tear out.
Or tear out, or whatever else like we were called back then. But yeah, it was baseline breaks was what it was called in like 2001, 2002, no 2003. 2003 that
You're
phrase
very
came
accurate
up.
with the days.
I'm
very impressed. I can't remember what I'd done yesterday.
So 2003 was when baseline breaks was termed. I think it was by Carl Loban from DJ Magazine, because he came down and did a feature on us. and that's when it appeared. But you know, a lot of people think bassline breaks is because it's got a bassline and it's like, you know, a bit faster. It's not. Like bassline breaks was structure. We use the structure, the drum and bass structure, the intro, the breakdown, the build up, the extra layer going into a big middle drop, coming out with all bells and whistles for the final bit of the tune. And we used that structure that we'd been using for years in drum and bass and applied it to breakbeat. We also ramped up the tempo to 138 because there was a lot of like garagey kind of DJ Zink's bingo was going on. There was a lot of tunes that were at that tempo, and being that we didn't like the other kinds of breaks that was being happening at the time, our DJ sets were basically compiled of Aquasky tunes on bingo, and anything else from the old school era, like original 92 material and stuff, and whatever else we could fit in. So everything was around that high tempo. So we then made 777 at 138, and Botch It wouldn't sign it. And this went on for 9 months.
Really?
They wouldn't sign it. And eventually we said, well, that's it. You know, we're going to go on to another label. But I think that's what the prod that they needed. So they decided they would release it. It went on to become their biggest selling.
Yeah,
12.
it was a big tune, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then from that we did Beat the System for Botch It and Scarpa. That's
Well,
the
777 became a bit of a template for baseline breaks. It kind of, I mean, that's it. You normally find there's a catalyst that happens and people are drawn to that and they start to imitate that, and it's literally spawned a whole scene, a whole side of breaks. Because, I mean, at that point, you had new school breaks, which, to be fair, I'm going to fill in the gaps and tell what you think, but Adam Freeland and Tayo, at that time, they were both PR guys. They were both press guys. They met up with Rennie and Rennie Pilgrim. So they basically, because they had backgrounds in PR, they made a scene really popular that wasn't actually that good.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So you had two guys that were working in PR. They made a scene out of not a lot because they convinced the press that this was the new hot thing. But the reality of it was that, like you say, it was backroom music that people were like, I know I should like this. I know it's popular, but I don't really, you know. For me, I remember when Rennie said, oh, you're making new school breaks. I thought, no, I'm making a combination of techno and with break beats in it. I didn't even consider what I'd done to be part of that scene. I remember going down to Friction and thinking, you can't dance to this.
That's exactly what we thought in Nuki. Yeah,
exactly what we think. Bless him,
he only had about 5 people in his room. We had everyone in the main room going mad for drum and bass. But
I mean, it came together afterwards because obviously the more people that would like, oh, well, this is interesting, and they kind of took a bit of the idea of it, the new school breaks, and kind of introduced it into like what they were already doing. Because obviously there was new producers, but in the same breath as like people like T-Power that have been around for a while, and they kind of incorporated like you did some of the elements, but then made it their own, like what you did. But you know, the bassline sound, like you say, it was a little bit faster. You know, I was kind of more, but you had the funky end of it. You had, you know, this tech funk, which
This was the great thing of that era is for us, it felt very much like drum and bass in '95. And the rave era of 1990, where you could draw upon any musical background. So we were sampling funky tunes, we were sampling reggae tunes, we were sampling like old drum and bass and rave tunes, and we were making tunes that were 4/4. Now on our Beat the System album, there's a 4/4 tune.
Yeah,
everyone loved it. Put the clock forward to about 2008. Suddenly, Breaks doesn't have 4/4, and there's a massive, great big like kickoff about people doing 4/4 tunes, like when we started Black Noise. But the early days of Aquasky versus Master Blaster, we were doing 4/4 influence because we grew up to jungle techno.
Yeah.
And jungle techno was breaks, like classic, 140, 150 BPM with a slamming doof, 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 doof. And for us, that was music. We didn't differentiate between 4/4 and breaks.
No,
it wasn't for us that there needed to be a line in the sand between the two. It was part and parcel. So we did Coffee on our second album with the Ragga Twins. Again, 4/4. We did that Dem No No We, which was like the theme tune to Ali G in the USA on the TV program with Ragga Twins. That was a bashment rhythm.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that did a bashment tune prior to that, but that was taken up by that whole fidget housey kind of Southern fried sound, that bashment rhythm. But we were already doing stuff like that in 2002, making tunes with that rhythm, and it was no thing to us because that was the beauty of that time and era, is that you could do anything, and that's what drew us to Breakbeat. And go actually quickly and on a quick aside because I think it's quite funny, but the first time I ever met Rennie, I was DJing with Rennie the opening night of Fabric. And I can't remember what year this would have been, 99 maybe or something like that. And he was DJing before us, and I was DJing like sort of all over the shop at that point, drum and bass and a little bit of new schooly breaky, sort of an old school and a bit of hip hop, and I was scratching and doubling up records and stuff. And Rennie was there, and I was like, oh my God, Rennie Pilgrim, rhythm section.
Yeah, rhythm section.
I was ripping his ears off,
right.
And he was not impressed.
Really?
He didn't seem to he didn't seem to be proud of what he'd
just
done.
you need to explain that to someone that doesn't understand.
Our rhythm section was this awesome drum and bass super group with Rennie Pilgrim, LSD. I can't remember the other two guys, but it was like a super group, and they had some massive Coming On Strong was one of their tunes, and and I was just made up to be, because I'm a big fan of that era of music. I was just made up. It's like bloody Rennie Pilgrim there, like big influence, and I was shaking his hand and trying to chat to him, but he didn't want to talk about it, and I left a bit gutted, to be honest with you, because I thought, I thought he'd be a bit more like pleased that someone had come up to him like 7 years later and was like, but I don't know. He didn't seem too impressed with his back catalogue. I think he is now. But
yeah, I'm sure.
Back then, I just I was a bit kind of like, I thought that would break the ice with him, but it didn't, and we didn't sort of, it wasn't until a number of years later that we sort of gelled. But I never got invited. Actually, when Fabric shut and all of that, we never got mentioned on the posters or on the adverts. They listed all the DJs that played and. Did they? Yeah.
I wouldn't say that.
You probably were on that list. I think everyone apart from us, and we were there on the opening night doing the opening night for Fabric. But again, that feeds into the whole kind of back scratching world of PR and London, to be honest with you, which we did not involve ourselves in whatsoever. We laughed at them.
We're going back to what I was saying about the new school breaks thing. I know at the time that. I'm sure that they were just experimenting with some ideas, and I think that the new school breaks itself, it inspired people to go on to make Breakbeat such a strong scene for many years. I think back then is that if you look back and your thoughts are the same as mine, but we've never discussed that. My thoughts are like, it's not really danceable, but then you saying it, I think, it wasn't just me.
Yeah. Well, but I can't, I'm not hating on Adam at all, because without Adam and his sort of ear for Aquasky could make a go at this music, we wouldn't have done breaks, and we wouldn't have. I don't know what wind it would have been, our third wind. I don't know. We went on our next little mission, and that was breaks, and that took 10 years of our life. I mean, we probably made ourselves a bigger name in Breakbeat than we did in drum and bass, because we had a whole genre of the music that basically we had created as baseline breaks. That was you were tastemakers, so there was no rights or wrong because you were setting a trend. Exactly.
So it's a lot easier to stay on top of the game when you're actually setting the template for what other people are following, rather than chasing somebody else. If that makes any sense.
Well, there was no one to chase. There was nothing to go from. We rewrote the rule book and the way we viewed it. We were stuck in Bournemouth again. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad. But we didn't have any outside influence. So we just did what we did, and we wrote the album Beat the System for Botch It and Scarpa, and the album Stay Fresh for Moving Shadow in the space of, I'd say, between 5 and 8 months.
Wow.
So we wrote 2 albums in that short space of time, And we wrote another album for Mr. Bongo, the Latin record label, under another name called Tenth and Parker. We also
that was the name.
Tenth and Parker.
Tenth and Parker.
So we did a Latin
Brilliant.
jazz disco album, which featured Snowboy from the UK percussionist Elisa Stansfield. We had the...
he looked like a rockabilly, didn't he?
He did.
I remember this guy.
Still does.
Does he?
Lovely bloke. Lovely bloke. Mark Murphy, the original jazz singer, who was, used to be friends with Jack Kerouac and, the whole beatnik generation of America, and then ended up working with people like Azimuth, and he was he was an amazing singer. He did a version of Red Clay, an incredible Freddie Hubbard tune that was sampled by Tribe Called Quest on their third album. The life of me, it escapes me what it's called now. So it was a huge tune, and I went and saw Mark Murphy perform at Ministry of Sound in '94, I think it was, for a Giles Peterson event, and I just fell in love with the guy. I just thought I loved he was just such a cool bloke that we ended up tracking him down and working with him. We went to San Francisco. We stayed in the hotel, and I stayed in the room that Alfred Hitchcock recorded or filmed Vertigo. So I was in the actual room that they did that. We were recording the music in Sly Stone's studio in Sausalito.
Really?
And then we mixed it down in Fantasy Records, the original jazz label, the Blackbirds and people like that were signed to. So we actually mixed it all down in Fantasy Records. We didn't have a name for the project. Now, I took a picture of myself stood outside of Fantasy Recordings.
Just to backtrack slightly. So in this 8-month period, you've literally got 3 different albums going on with 3 different genres.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we were finishing up the Tenth and Parker project just as we were recording all of the Master Blaster ones. But yeah, there was a photo of me outside Fantasy Studio, and and there was a street sign, and the street sign was 10th and Parker.
Right.
So the name 10th and Parker, that's where that came from.
Okay.
And it featured loads of people like the trumpet section from Blur. I had the guitar player from Fairground Attraction on it. It was just packed full of big names, and
right.
Yeah, so that was another thing we did.
So,
not many people know that, but that literally was a jazz disco Latin project.
Well, I'm going to dig that out because I love my jazz and I love my funk and soul.
Yeah, some really good bits there. And also, just quickly, Mark Murphy, at the time, he was probably in his 60s or something, and he turned up in an AMC Pacer car with a pair of Wellington boots on, a shawl. His wig was on sideways. It was all skew-whiffed. And we came with our manager, Paul Dowling from Quiet Man, who we mentioned earlier, from Madness's management group. And I remember Paul looking at me going, "Who the fuck is this?" And Mark was just sort of came in with his like mullet wig, and it was all skew-whiffed, little mustache, and he was tuning himself up on these little whistle pipes. And he was like, and he was tuning himself up to the, and we were just like, "Oh, this guy's mad." And later I found out I was doing an interview, reading an interview with Mark, and he was on crack at the time he turned up. So which would explain the whole madness of the situation. So he was not only in his 60s, he was on the crack pipe.
No.
Yeah, lovely bloke though. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. But me and Mark got on really well, and I used to, travel around and meet up with him at various gigs around Europe.
Got to dig this out, yeah.
Yeah, lovely guy.
So can I just ask? Just heading back, when you were making the Aquasky and Master Blaster, why add Master Blaster name, or was it just to distinguish the difference?
In a way, yes. There was 2 reasons. First, we were making drum and bass still as Aquasky.
Right.
So there were a few of our drum and bass tunes that were being played at that point on 33 instead of 45. Because the drum and bass, for a louder vinyl cut, you cut it on 45 RPM as opposed to 33. But a lot of people were mistakenly buying the Aquasky records and thinking, because if you play a record, a 45 RPM record at 33, so 170 BPM at 45 RPM would then be around about 135, 140 at 33 RPM. So people were mistakenly playing our records thinking that they were breaks tunes. Well, they weren't. They were drum and bass tunes. They were just playing them on the wrong speed. And so we were going out to clubs and hearing our music at the wrong speed.
Right.
And it sounded to us shit. So we didn't like it. Also, Botchit wanted Aquasky, the name. We didn't want to, at that time, sign Aquasky to Botchit because we were doing drum and bass. But once we realised, and this was over a period of time, it wasn't just over like a day or something, this was over a period of time, we started realising that there was an issue with our Aquasky music being played at the wrong speed. Right. We decided then we would have to come up with another name. So to appease Botchit, we kept the Aquasky and we did versus Master Blaster. Master Blaster is a fictitious thing. There's no such thing as Master Blaster. Okay. Master Blaster was basically a robot that lived in space that came down to Earth and inspired us to make breaks. That was the story at the time. Right, okay. We were probably smoking a lot or whatever. So
you were on the crack as well.
Yeah, I think we were at that point, yeah. Mark's bad influence. Not you, Mark Murphy on me. Master Blaster was just a completely fictitious robot. So if you look at the cover of Beat the System, there's a robot, and that basically was a guy called Mitch, a designer, did that. And because
we gave Lee Coombs.
Oh,
they're really good mates. Yeah.
Ah, there you go. Well,
he'd done all the Thrust artwork as well.
Yeah, because he was
Lee's label.
Yeah. Because I
think they shared a flat. I think they were flatmates once.
Oh, well, he's really successful though, isn't he?
Yeah, very. A lot of books, a lot of very. Anyway, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Well, he did the artwork and that little robot and that was Master Blaster. But I've seen numerous things on forums and people actually say to me like now and again, I really love the Aquasky versus Master Blaster, but since you no longer work with Master Blaster, I'm not really into the music as much. So well, when are you going to work with Master Blaster again? Oh, no. Still still people think Master Blaster is a real person.
I noticed that online when we put out a few questions, and someone highlighted saying it was something along those lines about working with Master Blaster. I was thinking, that's why I wanted to ask you. I was thinking, there isn't a Master Blaster.
No, there isn't a Master Blaster. Master Blaster was completely just made up like story that we came up with at the time, and eventually we dropped off the Master Blaster when we did Team Players. Master Blaster was very synonymous with the tear out sound, and with Team Players we wanted to try and go down a new direction, so we dropped the Master Blaster. Well, by this point Breakbeat for us had become like all dominating, we were touring non-stop, literally, like there was 3 of us and we would all be touring every weekend.
That was something I was going to ask you about, actually, because that was a question. How did it work? Because obviously there's 3 different people. It would be expensive to get 3 people out to do an Aquasky set, and also, I mean, you wouldn't get to play much each. No, in an hour and a half set.
During our time in the 90s in drum and bass, we would only DJ together. We wouldn't go out separately. Right. I mean, that was just a thing. We didn't want to be by ourselves. I don't know why, but we just wanted to work like DJ. It was an adventure when we were on a journey together, so we experienced everything together.
You want to enjoy it together.
Yeah, but we weren't getting as many good bookings because obviously the costs were involved very high, getting 3 people in, and so when we first started Breaks, we were probably DJing more of drum and bass, and also there wasn't enough music for us to play in a break set,
right?
So we'd have to mix it up with a bit of drum and bass because there wasn't any breaks that we really liked in 2000. It was really hard to put a set together. But as Master Blaster and the sound that we came up with got more and more popular globally, it was impossible for us to do all the commitments that were asked of us. So we had to split up. We
Right.
decided, right, okay, well, we won't DJ together anymore. We will go out and do separate gigs, and we couldn't even, with the three of us, keep on top of all the gigs. We literally, like, it was just endless
A
for
lot of
years.
demand.
Yeah, it went on for years, and we would DJ away all weekends, and we might have a few extra days for other activities and stuff in different countries, and then come back into the into the UK and just straight back in the studio. And it was pretty relentless.
So
to be honest.
when with the Aquasky sort of sound, I won't harp on this too much, but when it comes to DJing, is that obviously you all have different tastes. So how did that?
We all have different styles of DJing.
Yeah,
well.
that's what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So I mean, who did what, and kind of, or did you, when a show came up, did you do a little bit of research into the show and the right person go for the right job, or was it just
not at all? No, you got what you got. Like, I mean, we didn't play any differently, like musically. Like, we were all into the same sound, and we were releasing so much music on all our different labels and ourselves, and so it wasn't like we had different DJ sets. We were promoting and pushing our own acts and our own sound. So you would have got the same kind of, roughly the same kind of sound in DJ set. I find mixes now from 10, 15 years ago, and I struggle. The only way I know who's DJing is from how they DJ.
Right.
So like Dave likes to blend a lot of his breakdowns and kind of like brings things and layers on the breaks, whereas I've always kind of DJ'd very much on the bookem kind of thing. I like a long rolling mix. I will roll something out for minutes, and
me too.
I like rolling my, that's LTJ Bookham and his style of mixing.
Right.
That's what I inspired me when I started DJing, was the way he DJ'd. Kieran Kieran was the best of all of us. Kieran was DJing like from the early 90s.
Right.
He had his own decks, he had his record collection, so he was far ahead of me and Dave.
He's the most experienced out of the DJs.
Yeah, definitely.
Right,
so he had a bit more of a kind of like, just a bit more kind of
slick.
Well, not slick, but more like, he didn't need to think about it so much, I don't think.
Right.
Whereas I would sometimes overthink things.
Right. Okay.
I would kind of like, constantly. But you know what it's like when you're DJing, you've had a few beers, things go out the window, and you start randomly picking stuff and finding new great mixes that live in front of like 1,000 people. But I would quite often overthink stuff. But anyway, that's how I can tell who's DJing on old mixes, is how we mix. And I'm still of the same. I still like a long rolling mix.
Yeah, me too. So when you dropped the Master Blaster and you'd done the Aquasky and like the Team Players albums, obviously I was involved. I got involved with you at that time.
Well, we dropped.
Can I just ask one question?
I don't know.
How comes you released that on your own label and not Botch It?
Oh,
was that something you sat around and go, we're going to do something on our own label, or was it just?
Well, Team Players was 4 years after the Botch It album.
Right.
So
okay,
Botch It album came out in 2002. So by that point, I think why we ended up leaving Botch It was because it was a big label and it had a lot of releases. So we weren't getting the output we needed. And if anyone knows the output that we as Aquasky and Aquasky Master Blaster had, it was prolific.
Yeah.
I mean, we were releasing a couple of releases a week, and this would go on for years. We would release, there wouldn't be a time where there wouldn't be a promo of an Aquasky record out there, because that's all we did. And Botch It couldn't
banging them out.
We were banging them out, literally. Yeah, that's all we did. That was our life. And so there were, Botch It couldn't keep up with our output because they had a lot of other album commitments, and you know what it's like. You got to do your structure of your releases. There was a 4-year gap there, but we had also had left our distributors, ST Holdings, and we went with SRD. Yeah. And which was a far more slick and bigger operation. And SRD we'd worked with since 1995 with all our drum and bass and Moving Shadows.
Yeah, they were big on the drum and bass, weren't they?
Massive. That's how they got their name, was Rob Playford and John Knight, who owned SRD, they started together.
Yeah.
So
John's a character. John.
Yeah. He's sold it on now, I think, or he's
Yeah.
only like part ownership. But like, so basically, Rob and his Moving Shadow releases in the early 90s that were selling tens of thousands was what started and backed SRD. And then SRD then continued, obviously, with the drum and bass sound, and which they still do now.
You
But
know, they also do. I mean, at that time, they'd done a lot of indie as well.
well, that's what John
Yeah.
was about. He was about that,
Yeah.
that late punk sound. That's what John
Yeah.
loved. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was distributed by them as well with Whole Nine Yards.
Oh,
my
okay.
first
Yeah.
label. But yeah, I mean, they were. But actually, I hate to. I'm taking us down a rabbit hole now. But there was something really interesting about drum and bass because it did appeal to the indie audience as well. It made a really good crossover to people like Radio 1 DJs, people like, I don't know, Zane Lowe and people like that were playing drum and bass in amongst rock and metal and,
I must add something quickly to interject to your interjection. Zane Lowe once told me the first record he ever bought when he moved to England was Body Shot by Aquasky
Oh, shit.
from HMV in Oxford Street.
It's mad, yeah.
There you are. So
Yeah,
just chuck that in there. But anyway,
All right.
yeah, sorry.
Right, so let's just, we get back to team players, but yeah, sorry to...
Yeah, no. Well,
Sorry,
by this
people-
point, we weren't doing drum and bass. Some of our last releases was the MSX EP on Moving Shadow in 2003, and then we had High Life in 2004, and a few other bits. But by 2005, we were no longer making drum and bass.
Right.
So we no longer needed to worry about the Master Blaster issue and people playing the tunes on the wrong speed.
Right.
Plus, we weren't recording for Botchet anymore at this point.
Right.
So there was no reason to continue with Master Blaster. It also had the sort of connotations of the tear out as well, which, in all honesty, I think the name Aquasky has those connotations. But back then, I think the collaboration of the two names definitely, made people think they were going to get a certain sound. Now, with team players, there was like this ridiculous fake bloody story going around in the magazines that there was some fighting in between breaks. There was division between breaks. There was actually features, and I've probably got the magazine still somewhere, where it claimed that we were at war with different sounds. We were called Bloke Beat by you guys, and we called you guys Plod Step.
Plod Step. That was it for the tech funk.
Yeah,
sound.
so, there was
What
a big...
about the funky stuff? What did that? It was just cheesy beats.
Big beat, wasn't it? Cheesy beats, yeah, definitely. But there was a there was a division. There's no mistaking that. We didn't like Elite Force and what he did, and Elite Force didn't like us and what we did. And there's no it's not like it's a surprise to anyone.
I mean, this isn't personal. It's just a taste in music.
Taste
isn't
in
it?
music,
Yeah.
but the thing is, Shaq's very, has his own opinions, and I am of the same ilk. I have my own opinions, and it's not gonna. I'm not gonna get shaken off my opinions by someone else's opinions, and vice versa with Shaq. So, he started leaving shitty little.
Actually, I've mentioned this on the show before, but I will let you say it because when I worked for you, and I went in your office when we worked together on a team players release, and you'd collected all Shaq's feedback from your records. They were terrible. They were really bad, and you had them all pinned to the wall. all your favourite of his worst.
Yeah,
but you were
reviews.
continuing sending him music.
Yeah. Well,
He continued responding.
But the thing is with Shaq, at least he responded, and he had an opinion. And what's the point of sending a record out if you didn't respect someone's opinion? That's the way I looked at it. So though we were from different camps and we didn't see eye to eye. I mean, now I don't have, I think we've sort of made a friendship, and those opinions probably still there, but it's not really
nothing to do with people as people.
No, people as people. We're friends. I'd like to consider him to be a friend, not close, but someone I could chat with and have a beer with. But of course. But It was
was
hilarious.
funny.
It was
really
hilarious. Like, Shaq had a, it wasn't just our label. There was other labels in that kind of like that heavier break sound, and he would always leave these comments, and we'd share them. And
you used to say to me, you were like, they're the ones that used to look forward to seeing his review.
Yeah. I used to love what Shaq used to say, and but a lot of people would get knocked off with it. If it was a world of drum and bass, someone probably got a kicking out of that. But with us, it was this like, bit of fun, isn't it? That's what it was about. We never took ourselves seriously, and so fair play to the guy. At least like now, 10, 15 years later, I can remember Shaq's reviews. I can't remember anyone else's.
Can't remember the good ones.
Yeah, exactly. But so
thanks, Shaq.
So thanks, Shaq, for that. Yeah, but anyway, there was all these fake news stories about fake news. There was some sort of war going on in breaks, and I remember reading these in a number of magazines and thinking, no, there isn't. What are they talking about? There's no war. Well, like, we all get on. So I started, as I always do, overthink things, and I thought, well, how can we sort of like make a stand against this nonsense that's being said? How about we write an album and we collaborate with as many people and as many different styles and as many different kind of genres as possible? And so that's when the old phone book came out, and that's when we spoke to you.
Yeah, well, who was on the list? Who? The
only person that didn't make it was Crafty Cuts.
Right.
Yeah, we tried to do some tunes with Crafty, but they didn't happen. So we had a good few sessions, but nothing really. We didn't feel anything, and probably he felt the same. There wasn't anything that came out of those sessions that we felt strongly enough about. So aside from Crafty, everyone that we asked, we got and we worked with.
So who was on the album?
We had Paul Pendulum, Paul from El Hornet from Pendulum. We'd connected with him. He was a fan of Aquasky from back in the day when he was living in Australia. So I'm not sure how we got to meet up with. It was probably the old days of AIM, the way we used to send tunes online. The AIM inbox. Yeah, I think we may have got a hold of El Hornet that way, and we built a friendship there. Phil Hartnell from Orbital, he was doing review. He was sending us a feedback and loving the tunes we were making. Brilliant. So we reached out to him. Yourself, Teo. Autobots, because Autobots were inspired by
Jazz.
Yeah, they were inspired by our Beat the System album. I remember Jez telling me the story of them driving back up to Huddersfield. I think it's Huddersfield, or Manchester, or thereabouts.
Up that way.
Up north. Listening to our album, which then inspired them to do their Autobots thing. Same with the Breakfasters. I think it was our sound and what we were doing that got them into the studio together to make that sound as well. So we wanted to work with a few people that we'd built relationships with and toured with a lot, which, Aquasky, Autobots, Breakfasters, we were always in the same gigs, doing the same stuff together, or, we'll go into a club and they would have been there the week before or something. So who else was on? Diane Charlemagne was on there. Spider, who was
Diane Charlemagne was the singer from
Inner City Life.
Goldie, in case anyone's interested.
Yeah, who's again
legend.
Unfortunately passed away.
No.
Yeah, she died a few years ago. Yeah. So she's no longer with us. Oh. Lovely lady. Really, really got on well with Diane. Ragga Twins, of course. Never a project. Aquasky
they're very interconnected for you guys.
Yeah, we've got a long relationship and get on very well. They're like close friends. I consider them, like mates. As with Spider as well. I can't remember. We had Icy from America, we had that connection going on with Icy. We had Freak Nasty was on there.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. We had.
Was Tayo on there?
UK Apache, Tayo. Yeah, he was on there.
Yeah, go on. Keep going.
I think we had about 20 plus guests on that album. Dramatic Twins were on there, weren't they?
I'm trying to think back because there's a big photo that we all done on some roof or
somewhere. There's a video for that.
Is that?
Yeah, I'll show you it to you later. It's like they're team players. photo shoot video.
Yeah, there's so many people.
Yeah.
There. It was so crazy.
Yeah, I think there was about 20.
There's a lot of people. There, yeah.
people on that album. So, but that was basically the point of Team Players. It was to show that there wasn't any because I often look back on it. I often think there wasn't like a community in breaks. We had pockets of people and little gangs, little groups of people that's
a good way of looking at it. Little gangs.
But I often feel in breaks, like in drum and bass, we were a unit. Like drum and bass was against the world. Like we stuck together, we supported each other, and that's the way I looked at drum and bass. It was like a really tight little regiment. And breaks, I often find that there was too many people attempting to be superstars themselves beyond the music that they were pushing. And I often I felt a little bit disappointed in breaks that there could have been, we're looking back now 10 years later and what is breaks? I mean, where is breaks? I don't know what breaks is now. It's more probably, is it really breaks anymore? I don't think a lot of it is, but back then there was an opportunity. We were all over, not just us, Breakbeat, all over Radio 1. We were all getting the support, big support around the world. It was a massive scene, and it just crumbled away. It just disappeared. And a lot of time, I just think we didn't act as a strong unit where we backed each other up, even though we weren't making the same music. I think a lot of the times there wasn't that kind of community that was in drum and bass. Now, obviously, in drum and bass, if you stepped on the wrong toes, you get smacked about a bit. That's drum and bass was a bit more of a violent scene. It was a bit more kind of like rough and tumble, a bit more. You had to be wary what you said, and then there was a respect, a lot of respect in drum and bass.
Because it's probably why there was a bit more respect, because you knew that it was a little bit more real.
Yeah. You didn't say the wrong thing to you wouldn't have got away with a Shack review in drum and bass without having a knock on your door or your car burnt out or something like that. But in breaks, I often I've been asked a number of times, why did breaks disappear? I've often thought about it of an evening. I just think, well, what did we do wrong, like collectively? And I do think that. There's a number of things. Bootlegs was another thing I think that destroyed breaks, and we were a part of that.
Yeah, I think all genres do get to a point. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think all genres, because I've thought about that too. All genres tend to, when they have a new sound, they do it and it kind of develops, and then all of a sudden they will go, oh, actually, this sound lends quite well to this old stuff. And then the bootlegs appear because, obviously, clearing stuff's a bit of a headache. So that's why people just do bootlegs. Same happened with drum and bass. Same happened with house. The same has happened with pretty much all genres. And not so much techno for some reason. Don't know why. But, drum and bass happened with Mickey Finn and Aphrodite. We started using the old hip hop breaks. And,
Zinc and
Zinc and Hype and Zinc done it. So, and I mean, but those genres kind of they weathered it very well. Whereas I think in breaks, I mean, there still is a strong breakbeat scene. It's just not so much my bag, not so much my cup of tea. It's just because the scene at the moment is very much American-led, I would say.
Oh, right, okay.
And a lot of old school. Well, I mean, I'm going to mention him as Decline. The hotcake stuff that's come out is pretty much bootlegs, just repackaged as new releases. And obviously some of the stuff I'm like that's just a bootleg. It's not even. It's not close. It is a bootleg, the freestylers have been doing it with pirate jams, but that's where the scene is now. I'm not bashing it because obviously it is what it is. Probably I'm the same as you. That's why I just moved on. Just creatively, where other stuff has appealed to me. I don't think it imploded and there was a moment where it stopped. I just think it just developed into, it just took what was going on then and just moved, and that's why I sort of think that hotcakes and that's why that sounds very popular. And also in the American market is add a bit of rap into some breakbeat, they're happy, it's hip house, But yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I do think that it definitely sort of deteriorated, and like you said, the community kind of disbanded that was there, because they were just like,
Well, I think in regards to the bootlegs and also being a part of it, I don't think so much that it was like something that lent itself to breaks. It certainly did, but I think it was financially driven. There was a lot of good money to be made off white label bootlegs, selling 3,000, 4,000.
I'm sitting there smiling because I know it was.
Yeah. And a lot of the time you'd make more money doing that than you were releasing your own music. So there was a period in time where you could go to a record shop and there would be 5 bootlegs and 1 actual original breaks release. And it got to the point where you weren't the bootlegs were getting more shine than the actual breaks releases, and so I think that kind of in a way kind of reduced the power of breaks. But also I think there's that, I mean, for me it's that 2008 time. There was too much other attractions. So you had electro house, which was a big thing. So there's a lot of breaks guys moved in that way.
That definitely, electro house came in and definitely
had a big impact because you could see these electro house guys doing gigs for tens of thousands of people, earning loads of money, selling lots of records, and and
it wasn't far stretched from breaks.
No,
either.
it wasn't. It wasn't
too far away, actually.
And then you also had dubstep.
Yeah.
Horsepower and all of that stuff that was coming through, and the
scream and banger.
Yeah, exactly. And that was getting a lot of attention, and so that was drawing away a lot of the breaks guys as well. There was a lot of a lot of people going off in different directions, trying to juggle things like what we did with drum and bass and breaks. So, and what I don't know. You got to look at it in a practical kind of day-to-day 9-to-5 way. Would you be doing something that you're not earning that much money in, as opposed to doing something that you're earning lots of money in?
It's only a slight tweak.
Yeah, and a slight tweak.
Normally do.
So bootlegs, electro house, dubstep. I think all of that myself had a big, and also the lack of community support in breaks. I think those things had a big part of why. And the other thing was when Radio 1 and Annie Mac decided they didn't like breaks anymore, and I've had a chatting with various other producers, and Annie Mac or her the person who did all of her feedback,
Rachel Barton.
Their feedback.
I don't know if I should name someone there, should I?
Well, their feedback then became the Shaq feedback.
Yeah.
So Shaq lost his title because we were all sharing their feedback because it was so in a way disrespectful. And then very you had backing and support, and then suddenly you lost it. Radio 1 was not listening or interested in breaks anymore. It was all about dubstep, electro house. It was about I don't know, a lot. It just wasn't moving in the same direction it had done for the previous 3 years, and so I think that probably had a bit of an effect on it as well. Because when you had people like Zane Lowe, Annie Mac, playing your tunes on a Friday night and interviewing you live on the radio and stuff.
Marianne Hobbs.
Hobbs, yeah. You had, that brought a lot more attention to the sound. When that tailed off, that obviously also had an impact on breaks going into.
But I mean, radio had more impact in general then, and now there's so many online stations, and it is. I mean, I also think that there's a major sort of revolution going on social media as well. Throughout that period, we went from, like you say, firing out records by post to a link, and then all of a sudden a link just doesn't seem worth anything. With a piece of vinyl, is solid. It's you've got a garage full of it. So
yeah.
I mean, I think there's I think also is that when breaks started to when breaks ended, there was a big shift in the way that music was shared and promoted and everything about it, you know, and obviously that had a major impact in the money side of things as well.
Yeah, there was like less money around. You couldn't release vinyl. I mean, you know, vinyl was dying.
I mean, even though we're probably discussing it at this, we're sort of debating it as such, is that there's probably a lot more moving parts as to how it didn't just die. I think that there was a lot of little things that came in and chipped away at it that all added up to the scene probably struggled to survive because of where it was based, what it was based upon had changed.
The whole background had changed in those last few years, at least the last few, you know, I'd say 2008, 2009 was kind of like, for us, I think we stopped making breaks. That's when we moved on to Black Noise, but
so that was where I was headed next, Black Noise. Because so was it a conscious thing of like, we're going to stop doing Aquasky and start doing this, or was it kind of did they work parallel for a little while and then?
No, they worked parallel. What happened was Fatboy Slim contacted us and he wanted a load of our music, our Aquasky music, for his compilation. Dance bitch, or I don't know, some shit, I don't know what bitch. Anyway, so we were licensing quite a bit from Passenger to Southern not Skint and things like that. Also we had the Noisier connection as well, which we licensed.
That was on Skint, weren't it?
We licensed it to Skint.
Backtrack just quickly because we do jump into it. You done a collaboration with Noisier. You know?
No, we didn't collaborate. No.
What was it?
No, they did a track called Gutter Pump. And Gutter Pump originally came to me as Hustle Athletics. That was their down-tempo alias. Now, whenever people in drum and bass back in that time started making breaks, they came to us. Because that was quite often
drum and bass
because they saw Aquasky drum and and there was money being made in breaks at that time. So why wouldn't you get involved a little bit with it? So they had their own name, Hustle Athletics, and they sent me this thing via AIM. We were chatting. They're lovely guys, and we were chatting on AIM, and I loved the tune, but they wouldn't sign it to me. And this was going on for months and months, probably about 6 months, 8 months. I was chasing them for this tune. Eventually, some reason they decided we no longer want. They decided they want to sign it with me. So I signed Gutter Pump to Passenger and got Tom Reel and Rogue Element to remix it.
Who done a great remix.
Fantastic! Won a Breaks Pole award. That did.
Did it?
Yeah. The only award that ever came our way from Breaks Pole. We never got anything from that. But I suppose we didn't give them enough sponsorship money. But I signed Hustle Athletics, and then halfway through the contracts and that, they decided they no longer wanted to do Hustle Athletics, and that they were now Noisier. Now Noisier, they did one of the MSX EPs on Moving Shadow that we did. So we had a very brief period on the same label, about 2004, on Moving Shadow. So there was a bit of a connection from the old days of old, and in 2007, I think it was 2006, 7, something like that. We signed Noisier and released that, and it did so well that Skint came and licensed it off us, and they did a vocal version and went off, and and when that was the end of that. But we'd already now sort of had a relationship with Skint through that, and so they reached out to us when Fatboy Slim was playing a lot of Aquasky stuff, and they asked would we want to do some stuff for them. So we agreed. We went up and met them at their funny little castle manor house that they work out of, or used to work out of, in this big gardens, and we met them, and sort of they didn't want the name Aquasky because of the I suppose at the point of breaks was tailing off, and the whole kind of connotations of drum and bass, and they had a kind of like more of a cool hip kind of audience, and not saying that we're not cool and hip, but certainly probably in 2008 the tear out sound of Aquasky probably wasn't current anymore. It wasn't cool and hip anymore. So we came up with the name White Riot after the Clash. But we weren't allowed to use it because they thought it was racist.
Oh, okay.
So for a laugh, we thought, right, we'll call ourselves Black Noise, because Black Noise was a record label that we ran, a drum and bass label we ran in the early 2000s.
It's a great name.
Oh, thank you.
I really like this
but
name.
we thought it was funny because White Riot was racist, Black Noise wasn't.
I know.
So we did it just as a little kind of like, let's just go throw that one out there for a bit of humour and see what they say. And they went with it, and we thought, hang about, well, that's a bit weird that one thing's racist and the other one, neither of them are racist. Well, I don't even know where. It was just PR nonsense. It was just too much overthinking going on, I think. So Black Noise came around, and then we started releasing on Southern Fried and remixing everyone from Diplo to Crookers to, oh my God, Young Punks and
killing it for that, mate.
We were just smashing it. We've done, we were doing so many big remixes for big names. Can't remember half of them now.
So this is like your third reincarnation of the trio.
Yeah. So it was. So
you got your third wind.
We got our third wind at that point. So Black Noise, well, probably our fourth wind, because we trip hop, drum and bass, and then breaks, and it's about fourth maybe wind at this point. Electro, well, we didn't really want to do the electro house thing. We wanted to retain the sort of ballsy rave inspired. So our EPs were very rave inspired, but
it's a horrible word, isn't it? Electro house.
I
could see you just go. You recoiled then. Went, well, we didn't really.
Well, the other name was Fidget House, wasn't it? And that was just as bad, isn't it?
One of the guys is really big from down your way, the Bournemouth.
Trevor.
Trevor Loveys.
Yeah. He came up with
done
a name
remix for
with, it was him and Switch that came up with the name Fidget House.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think he was part of Switch. Anyway.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, I think originally he was.
Yeah, it was Dave Taylor.
Yeah, Dave, that was his name. Yeah, Dave. Yeah.
And now he does Major Lazer.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Go on, carry on.
Yeah, so we did 2 EPs, and I managed to bring in some rapper friends of mine, some American rappers that I knew on that project. I think there was Sportio, who was originally someone I met in 2007 in LA, at DJ Lethal from House of Pain Limp Bizkit studio. So we were working with Lethal, and Sporty was working in the next studio, and I got on well with the engineer that was working with Sporty, so I came in on a few of our days off and sat in on the sessions with Sporty and got Sporty to voice some Backdraft tunes, because Backdraft was signing an album with us, so I got him to do some tunes, and they sounded good. So I flew back out to America a few months later and stayed another month in LA and recorded more with Sporty and did a whole networking thing. That's where we connected up with Pusher, the company that does all the trailers and stuff. Rudy, I did a radio show with Rudy. And Rudy, who runs Pusher. Okay. They do all the film trailers. Right. Big, very big, lot of money in that game. Kieran works a lot with them these days, but so that connection came from that meeting to LA as well. I did just tons of networking.
So this with the Black Noise, you kind of just went.
This is Aquasky.
Oh, right, okay.
This was before Black Noise, so I had all these acapellas.
Unfortunately, I got you.
Unfortunately, we fell out with Backdraft, and Backdraft fell out with us, and we never did the album, and it got all a bit dark, messy, and we're friends with Backdraft now, and I do say I'm really, one thing I really regret is never releasing that Backdraft album, because I still rate them as producers, and I think that would have been a great album to have released, but it didn't happen. So we ended up with a lot of acapellas, sporty acapellas. So we instead of just sort of doing nothing with them because it cost us a shitload of money.
Right.
We decided to use them as part of the Black Noise. But also, there was a rapper called Lex One, part of Wizard Sleeve. And Lex used to be my driver in the early 2000s because we were signed to an American DJ agency, really big one. And she just, we were the only drum and bass guys on there. I don't know, she just somehow gravitated to Aquasky and asked us to join the roster with loads of people like Qbert and J. Ruder Damager and Public Enemy and stuff like that, and it was just us, the weird English drum and bass breaks group. So we were touring a lot in America, and my driver, who used to take me looking for record shopping, was Lex. And I kept in contact with Lex, and eventually found out he was a rapper a number of years later. So I was hassling him, and eventually he sent me a zip with about 80 tunes in. And I had to go through 80 tracks, and I found this one tune out of all of that I loved, and it became a tune called Me Plus You, and it was on the first Black... Oh. I'll give her a call back in a sec. So we...
so it was on the first...
Yeah, so the tune Me Plus You was on the first Black Noise EP. And it later then became, we re-recorded it, and it later became Riverside, Let's Go, which is another whole story.
So how did this connect? This is so... Right, so Riverside, as we know it...
was Sydney Sampson,
who's a Dutch producer.
Dutch producer, yeah.
How did what was the interconnection between...
Well, they got signed, or he got signed, that tune, got signed to move, not Moving Shadow, what am I talking about? Ministry of Sound in the UK. And
your track?
No, the Riverside, the original Riverside instrumental, the club tune. And then our friends, the Cut Up Boys, who did a lot of compilations and stuff for Ministry, were asked to source top lines, and that was one tune. So they said, we tried a few different top lines out, and a little short list here. Rather than us do it, it's your vocals, why don't you go and do it and put a pitch into Ministry? So we got the Riverside tune, and we'd already done a kind of like, as I was sort of saying to you before we went on the mic, some sort of like we went on some sort of music writing course with our managements at the time, who were Simple Minds managers as well. And so we went on a bit of a learning curve on how to write pop songs, how to write hit songs sort of thing. Right. So we then applied that knowledge that we'd acquired recently into deconstructing Riverside and rewriting it into a verse chorus structure and into a 3-minute tune. So we chopped it all up and then made this little kind of edit of it. And then the vocals for Me Plus You is really X-rated. So they couldn't go out as they were. So we then had to go and get the guys, Lex and Mike, to re-record the lyrics so they were clean and acceptable. And that's kind of like... Then we handed that to Ministry, and they loved it. So we ended up with like a pop hit. Yeah. But
it was under somebody else's name, but
but
you were the writers on it.
Yeah, and we have half the publishing, and we were big part of that. I mean, I put a lot of my time and effort into that release. Now it's weird because if I look back on my career, the biggest embarrassment of my career is Riverside Let's Go. Like, I cannot listen to it. I can't talk about it. I don't
really
like. Now I live in the normal world. Like, people find out about music. Oh, you make music? What sort of music? I try and tell them about the Aquasky stuff they don't know. I say, that tune Riverside Let's Go. Oh my god, that was even like parent.
But it charted worldwide, didn't it? It was
big chart.
So Riverside was it was a chart hit. Yeah, worldwide as well.
Yeah, it went in a number of countries, went top 10, and in this country it went to number 2.
mean,
I
that's
went gold.
Big. That's as big. I mean, that's nearly as big as it gets. Nearly.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we were only beaten to number one by 300 sales.
No.
Owl City, Firefly or Firelight or Fire. Owl City beat us, and because we got the sales figures, like our publisher got them, and we were beaten by 300, only 300 to the number one spot. And tell you what, now I'm sure you do the same now and again. You listen to Radio 2, hear a Popmaster of a morning if you're working, and that Firefly bloody tune, that Owl City, comes up so many times as a bloody question on Popmaster.
Really?
And every time I'm like, oh, you little fuckers. So yeah, we missed out by about 300 sales from a number one. But it was, as I was saying, it's the biggest embarrassment of my career. But in a way, I've got to be thankful when I look at life, with rose-tinted glasses quite often anyway. And I wouldn't have been able to make my departure from music without that song achieving the success it achieved. So I wasn't at that time looking at leaving music, but after the shitstorm that happened with that release and all the headaches that came with it, and just the general unpleasant way we kind of experienced at the hands of Southern Fried, and then it was so flipping hit. It was like a episode of Nathan Barley every time we went up there. It was just we come back thinking, what the is that? It was just a different world for us, and I'd had enough by that point. Breaks were slowing down, as we've already covered. There was a lot of, my role in Aquasky quite often would be the debt collector. I would be the one that would have to get the money to chase people for cash. And quite often, I would then jeopardize relationships because I'd be chasing people for money, just to get money, just to pay. We couldn't afford to live without being paid for what we were doing. So it got.
So with So I just want to go back just slightly. So at this point, Black Noise was the only project you were working on. You just had this big hit, and that's when you decided to call it a day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to want to rectify what you're saying here.
That's exactly what happened. Our publisher Tim Medcraft, who formerly of Bucks, who helped a lot in Riverside. I got to give him a shout out for that. And he said afterwards, he said, wherever there's a hit, there's a rip. And I thought, I spent years chasing our royalties for that record. Luckily, we were clever enough not to sign our publishing to Southern Fried. So
did they want it?
Yeah, of course they did. 360 deals, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we wouldn't sign one, so we wouldn't sign the publishing over to them, and which was great because it meant that we could keep an eye on the sales around the world because we had the publishing information. So that was a great asset and a benefit to us in order to chase our royalties. And it just went on for years. Absolutely, it was just shocking behaviour for Fatboy Slim's label. And they wouldn't have had that hit had it not been, it was us that done that. It was us that sorted the deal out with Ministry. Literally, they were just the label that had signed and done the original. They had nothing at all to do with that release, nothing. They literally just banked the money that it made. I just had enough by that point. I just thought, well, hang about, I could sell 2,000-3,000 records and make more money on a little independent drum and bass breaks release than I did on a number 2 single.
Wow.
Over time, obviously, with the publishing, that takes a few years to come through, we made very good money.
Yeah.
And so a couple of years later, after that release, or a year later, when the publishing money started coming in, I had already made a decision to move on from music, as had Dave from Aquasky. So we both were in a position where we had a bit of money. So Dave
set yourself up.
Set ourselves up in next. I often thought, the way I look at it is I could use that money to prop myself up in a young man's game and go for another 5-10 years. or maybe 5 years. Let's be realistic nowadays. But or I could use that money for the better good of my family and my future, because I've never had a job.
And you've got 3 kids.
I've got 3 kids. 3 kids, mortgage. I've
3
never,
you know of.
yeah, but I've never had a job. Never worked for anyone. Always self-employed. Always been involved in music. Had never made a step out into the real world. But also, I hadn't got any life skills to offer to my children.
Just out there hustling with music.
I if they wanted to DJ and they wanted to learn how to run a record label, I'm the man. But anything practical around the house or out and about outside, I couldn't offer them because I didn't have. My dad was is an all-rounder. He can do electrics, he can do woodwork, he can do cars, and I couldn't do any of that. Literally no ability and skills on that side of things. Plus, I was a real real fucker as when I was a younger kid. I was always in trouble, always getting the house raided, always in getting arrested, and all weekends in prison, and I've long criminal record, and so. I didn't want to be, I say long criminal record. It's not that long, but it's long enough to like impact upon getting jobs.
Yeah.
I made a conscious decision around the time of Aquasky to walk away from that part of my life, not have anything to do with it, separate myself from those friendship bases, and focus on something positive. And that's when karma came in my life, and that's how I've always led my life, being nice to others and giving to others, and if you get something back, all good. But just that's the way I look on upon life.
Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Exactly. Yeah. So going back to not having any skills, and I just thought, well, I've got a bit of money here. I'd already just started a little part-time college course doing wildlife and conservation. Which is, we chatted before we got on the mic about that. I went on a family holiday into the New Forest camping. I went on a walk with the National Park Rangers of the New Forest, and found myself adding as much as the lead ranger into the walk. And the walk,
because you grew up there.
I grew up in the New Forest,
early,
that's where I grew up. I know loads about the New Forest, the flora and the fauna of the forest. It's what I was about, but I rebelled against that as a child, and hence got into hip hop and got into trouble, and
done the opposite
and messed up my school and everything because I was rebelling against that comfortable countryside living. Now I love that way of life, but so the ranger came up to me and said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the music business." She said, "Oh, you should do this. You're great. You really helped me out today." And so the seed was planted. And by that Christmas, so say 4 or 5 months later, I found a course. I enrolled myself on it for 6 months. Really enjoyed it. Finished the course. Handed my library books in. No idea what I was going to do at this point. We were still making music. We did Raise the Devil album at this point, but I had no idea what to do. The woman in the library, I got on well, as I always do with most people, got on well with a woman in the library, and she said, "Well, go and look in that corner over there. There's loads of jobs, for this kind of industry." So I didn't know it was there. I went over to the corner, looked at this pin board, and there was a job being advertised for an apprentice ranger for Dorset County Council. So I decided that sounded good. Deadline for the application the following day. So I made a call to my partner, and I was like, "Well, this is a big commitment. It's a whole 12 months. Money's terrible. Could we do it?" Well, thanks to the Riverside money, yes, we could do it.
Right.
So I then took the apprentice ranger position, did that for a year, finished the apprenticeship early because I did really well in it. Got then employed by the New Forest National Park as a ranger. So now I was back. I was actually doing the job that 2 years prior someone said I should try and do. So they employed me. And then from then I worked for numerous different estates around Dorset, Lulworth, where they have Bestival. I worked for that estate. I work for the biggest conservation company.
Doing the opposite of sitting inside the studio.
Well, this is it. Yeah,
actually out in
this is it. I wanted
out in nature.
I wanted to do the most opposite thing than what I've done for the last 20 years of my life. You know, in working in at night, like sleeping in the day, traveling the world, being in airports, airplanes, hotels, living in that weird kind of odd friendship, no friendship way, state of life, and you know, and.
The loneliest person in a busy room. Someone described DJing as that you're the only one that stands up. You're standing up there playing to like thousands of people, but you travel on your own. You spend all that time on your own. You're in the hotel on your own. You go to the only time you're intermingling with people is that 2 hour set that where everyone just they're looking at you as like the key person, but you are. Technically, everything else is on your own.
Yeah. You're a lonely man in another country, aren't you? Like an Englishman abroad, as Sting once said. But
so
there's
so I mean, so you stepped out of music briefly. Well, I say briefly, probably a few years actually.
In 2011, I made the conscious decision not to DJ anymore. I wanted to focus solely on my apprenticeship, my retraining, and getting a job and supporting my family. So I turned down all the gigs. I didn't do any gigs for 3 years, 4 years. And even now, as Aquasky, none of us really DJ.
Right.
It's a conscious decision. We don't really want to DJ anymore. It's we've done that, burnt ourselves out a little bit. And also, what would we play? I mean, retro breaks. I don't know.
I've done a couple of retro.
I've done a couple of retro breaks.
I enjoyed it because we're different in that respect. Is that I hadn't played breaks for 10 years, so it wasn't like I was out playing it. I literally had a good 10-year break of playing anything like that. So I just kind of revisited. And went, so it was kind of a bit different for me, like whereas you were on and off for so long, you probably kind of grew out of it.
Oh yeah, totally. We completely burnt ourselves out of breaks. There wasn't anything more we could do for breaks than what we have done. Like we ran so many labels. We probably, including the bootleg labels, we probably had about 7 labels running at once. Right. We had releases nearly every week. We were DJing everywhere. We'd done every single style of breaks there was. There wasn't anything that we hadn't turned our hand at. Where could we go with this any further than what we had achieved? So, when we started Black Noise, we just felt, well, this is like something fresh. This is a new angle, a new direction. We got a lot of stick from people saying, oh, yeah, you're making house now, you should be doing breaks, sell out, blah, blah, blah. But, you look at those people now that were saying that in 2009 to us, they're the ones that are making stuff that sounds like house now that they're passing off as breaks. Right. So, it was just one of them things, and I'd had enough at this point. I thought, well, we can't just keep. Aquasky has always been about moving forward with a new sound. It wasn't about just keep churning out the same shit. Yeah. And we got into a formula with breaks, and we were churning out the same shit all the time. Yeah. And that sounds bad because the music was great, but for us as artists, it was getting a bit tiring.
For your own inspiration.
Yeah, we couldn't. We knew what a tune would sound like before we even got in the studio. Yeah. We knew exactly how it was going to come around, and that was a good thing about Aquasky, is that we were never, between the three of us, short of ideas. So we can just reel off tunes. It's not a problem for us. It's not like we've burnt ourselves out because we can't make music anymore. It's just we weren't getting inspired to make music anymore. We could make music. We could make another 500 tunes if we had the time, money, and perseverance. But it's just.
So you stepped out of it for those reasons.
Yeah.
And Dave stepped out.
Kieran
carried on.
Kieran's
or sort of production wise.
Well, Kieran carried on with our sample packs. We were doing sample packs also as Monster Sounds with Loop Masters while we were as Aquasky. So that was a project we started. But Kieran carried on the sample packs after me and Dave went off and started retraining. Kieran makes music for like trailers. He's just done. What's he just done? He's just done a Marvel Ant-Man 2 or something.
Oh,
He's done the
really?
trailer for that.
Oh,
He did
cool.
the trailer for, blimey, Sherlock Gnomes or something like that was another
seen
one he
that,
done.
yes, yeah,
That's another Kieran one. He did the one for the Django Unchained.
Really?
He's done quite a few bits and bobs over the years.
Fantastic.
So that's what Kieran enjoys. It's not something I couldn't do that. You know what it's like. You're pitching ideas. I'll make it sound like this, make it sound like that. No guarantees. You're working for weeks on end. You might not get paid for anything.
Yeah, there's no demo fees anymore, and they're just like it's a hit and hope, really.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? And then you'd have to spend so much time. Then you have to tweak it, and then 3 weeks later, sorry, we didn't use it.
Yeah, we went with someone else. Like,
or we went for the original tune that we told you that we wanted you to make a tune to sound like. But anyway, we went for that original tune. So I was getting a little bit jaded with the whole thing, and didn't have the patience, to be honest with you. I was on my own new little travel, and Kieran's he's he's kind of very methodical, patient kind of guy. Where probably picked up from this interview, I'm not. I'm a bit erratic. I'm a little bit. My mind's always thinking. It's like the two steps ahead. I'm always kind of thinking of the next thing, but. So gave up DJing, came back to it for about a year, and just kind of, don't know, just. My last gig was Boomtown, the Boomtown Festival last year with the Ragga Twins, and my only gig that I'm going to do this year is the Boomtown Festival with the Ragga Twins. Awesome. And I've been offered lots of gigs, but I've turned them down. Maybe one day Aquasky will be back out there DJing again, but at this time. It's not going to happen, but there is a but to this. We are back recording again, so we make drum and bass.
You were in the studio yesterday.
We were in the studio yesterday. Yeah. We do drum and bass.
Saw the posts. Sounded quite excited actually for someone that was burnt out. And
No, well, actually, I think Aquasky versus Master Blaster is going to make a return. It's just where just. Been massively inspired by this kind of new house kind of sort of crossover breaks, old school kind of vibe that's going on at the moment, and for me, it reminds me a lot of jungle techno that was around in '93, 25 years ago, and I've got.
Do you want to name check some people who's been inspired?
A special request, Paul Wolford. That is definitely, I would say, the guy that I heard his set, and it was James at Arcadia that put me on to Paul Wolford because, I was saying
Paul's a nice guy as well. Yeah.
I've never met him, but I've spoken to him on Twitter.
He done a remix for me and Shaq.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nice guy.
Yeah, he seemed like a nice guy. Jez Autobots, I think, knows him as well.
Been around the block many times. But,
not the only ones.
Yeah.
But he was like, I just like what he's doing, and luckily with my connections and the history that I've got, I know a lot of the people that wrote those original old school tunes. So I was in France about a month ago, and I was driving through the French countryside, and I had a friend, Ian Lloyd, a friend of mine's old school mix in the car, and this Nookie tune came up. Nookie being an old drum and bass producer from Reinforced and Moving Shadow, so I know Nookie, and I did a Legends of Moving Shadow gig last year with a lot of the old Moving Shadow boys, and so I got to like hang out with Nookie again. So I just sent him an email when I got back to England. I said, do you have the parts for that tune at all? And he goes, I'm at work at the moment, but let me have a look. 2 hours later, get sent the parts to the tune. So I'm like, wow, this is great. It's a jungle techno tune.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing this Paul Wolford stuff, and I'm thinking, well, like there's not much difference. The tempos are a little bit the same, the vibes are the same, the structures are the same. So I chatted with Dave and Kieran, and I said, what's your thoughts on doing a bit of music like this? And I think we're all in the right frame of mind at the moment. So we're, I never thought we'd make breaks again. This isn't really breaks. It's breaks. What I would say was breaks in 2002, where we could pull anything together, and
Right.
there wasn't any kind of barriers and boundaries, and there weren't people saying that you had to make it sound like this or the other. So yeah, it is breaks. It's got breaks in it. This tune we did yesterday, it's got an amen in it. It doesn't
Right,
get more
wicked.
breaks than that,
No.
but it's got one hell of a 4/4 like
Some
you know,
feel to it.
Yeah, well, not feel. It's full
Oh,
on.
it is.
Doof, 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 like
Oh,
it's full on,
wicked.
like so. It's pretty tough. Hence why we thought maybe Master Blaster might need a return for this one.
Wow.
Because Master Blaster was always synonymous with when Aquasky went on a new journey. He, it's a fictitious robot that lives in space. It's not real.
It just comes down to inspire you whenever you need it.
But it's like a safety cushion. It's like a comfort blanket. It's like, all right, let's go and get Mr. Master Blaster back down, and we'll go on a new mission. So this could be the start of a
Watch
new
your space, I guess.
Maybe, yeah. That remix went very well yesterday. Me and Dave are in the studio again on Thursday to crack on with it a bit more. And we make the drum and bass for Simon Bassline Smith's Drum Sounds Technique label.
Right.
So we work with them doing drum and bass. So yeah, 23 years after Aquasky was created, 25 years after we first started all working together, we're making drum and bass again, liquid drum and bass like we used to make in 95, 96. And we are going back on a breakbeat journey.
Fantastic.
So, watch this
comes
space
around
literally.
goes around.
Yeah. But this time around, lads, like we were talking before we got on the mic, this time round, we're not doing it for money. We're not everyone was making music for money because that's how we live. You can't do anything without money. So that's what you need to live. But now we don't need the money from music to live. We've all accomplished in other parts of life, and so money isn't a big driving force of this. It's creativity, and that's the beauty of where we are now. We don't have to make anything to sell like lots of money to prop up and pay our mortgage. We pay our mortgage, and there's other things I got into back in 6 years ago. I got into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and stuff like that, and I started like researching about that because I felt that was something exciting, a future of the world, so in 2012 I started researching about cryptocurrencies and the various ones. I think there was only 6 back then, and reading up about Bitcoin and its benefits and how it works and how it's structured and how it's mined, and I've done it ever since. I've just sort of just got into that whole side of things. So
I've got some friends that have just lost a load of money.
Oh well, everyone's lost a lot of money but the thing is, you had to be in there early. You see, like I got, when I
This
got
is
in,
about a month ago. It all just hit rock bottom.
it hit rock bottom. But when I got into it, it was Bitcoin. They just weren't worth anything really. They're so cheap like back then. So it was a good move at the right time, and so it's helping kind of. So I got the guys, the rest of Aquasky, they're all into it now.
Right.
And I got them into it before the recent crash in it, but it was going to come back. It's going to be,
of course,
it's going to be whether it's Bitcoin or not. You can't have like that way of the open ledger, the open source ledger. You just can't like go back from this point. This is, you can send money for pennies around the world. You can you're the owner of your own fortune. You don't need banks. You can interact with other people peer to peer. You don't need all of these old institutional powerhouses.
Right.
You don't need people you don't need that anymore. This is why you've got your George Soros and your Rothschilds and your Rockefellers and your JP Morgans all now buying into cryptocurrencies, because they know that the financial sector as we know it isn't going to be around in 5-10 years time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a completely different landscape. And I'm not selling this to people, but I honestly believe it's probably a good time to get into it now before it becomes something that you potentially you could look after yourself and your family if you can get in at the right point.
Yeah.
going forward. Because
now's a good time.
It is a good time. I mean, it's crashed. It's a great time to buy back into it. But the way people look at it is like, it's this weird, it's called FOMO, fear of missing out. People will buy in when it's going really sky high because they think, oh my God, there's loads of money to be made. No, the time to buy is when it's dropped.
When it's on its arse.
When it's on its arse. Get in at that point and then ride that wave back up again and do what you need to do. Invest in a few different currencies. There's like 1,600 of them now.
Is there?
Yeah, yeah. There's so much like diversity to it. It's a whole sector. It's got billions of pounds transacting every day between people around the world. It's a huge, and you know, again, why would anyone go back to like fractional reserve banking and the you know, all of these banking cartels that control us and this, like hold us down? Like we are, you know, we're a generation that are in debt to the banks, credit cards, debit cards, mortgages. You know, we are constantly in debt to the banks. Our wages are being crushed. The cost of living costing more. You know, there's no way of climbing out of this without kind of bypassing those people that are holding us prisoner and hostage in our lives. And that's what the good thing I think of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are, is that you regaining freedom and the control of your money and your assets and who you deal and interact with, and you don't need to start giving money away to all of these like cloak and dagger companies out there, like financial institutes out there that are just picking us off and holding us down, you know, controlling us. Like it's starting to sound like a David Icke thing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah,
I was just sitting there thinking, God, I need a hit.
Yeah.
If I make a ton of money, I'll give you a shout.
But, you know, it was just like, again, like something I heard about it in 2012. I'm a big Max Kaiser fan, and he was talking about it, and so I started researching and talking to Max about it actually, and a few other people. And back then there was nothing. I couldn't find any information. It was like a couple of websites, and I spent months and months researching and writing stuff down and working it all out, and you know, got involved in it. And yeah, it's an exciting time.
So yeah, well, there you go.
There you go, cryptocurrencies.
Cryptocurrency. Right, well, look, I mean, we've done a long interview, but thank you so much for doing this.
It's going to be absolute murder for you to edit this.
It's going to be murder for me to edit. But thank you so much. Really appreciated. Yeah, before we finish up, can I get some stings? This is Brent, Aquasky, blah, blah, blah. You're listening to Lowering the Tone with me, Katie, and blah, blah, blah.
Wouldn't I?
Yeah, go on in. You can try a few times.
This is Brent from Aquasky, Passenger Records 777, and you're listening to Meet KT and Brent from Aquasky on Lowering the Tone.
Go on, let's have another one for good measure.
This is Brent from Aquasky and Aquasky Master Blaster, and I'm sat across the table with Meet KT. This is a breakbeat convention. We're throwing it down. We're talking this, that, and the other. We're putting the world to right, and we're going to go and bring back breaks, and it's going to take over the world. You hear?
Thanks, mate. Right, episode 24, done and dusted. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to help, please share the link. Tag me in. We've got a Facebook group if you're interested in chatting about the shows. It's just Lowering the Tone. Right, I'm going to love you and leave you. we're done.